Thank you for joining us today on Earthfile. Welcome to the program. I'm Ayola Kasim. On the eve of the first major United Nations conference on water in over 45 years, held in March, the UN World Water Development Report 2023 says 26% of the world's population, or 1 in 4 of us, doesn't have access to safe drinking water, and 46% lacks access to basic sanitation. It's painted a stark picture of the huge gap that needs to be filled to meet UN goals to ensure all people have access to clean water and sanitation by 2030. The UN says the estimated cost of meeting the goals is between $600 billion and $1 trillion a year. But equally important is forging partnerships with investors, financiers, governments, and climate change communities to ensure that the money is invested in ways to sustain the environment and provide potable water to the 2 billion people who don't have it, and sanitation to the 3.6 billion who lack it. The 2023 Water Conference brought together almost 200 governments to find solutions to this problem. We'll have a look at the decisions taken there and the way forward. Do stay with us. Emmanuel Villeneuve, whose farm in western France is among those due to benefit from a contested irrigation reservoir, is visibly shaken when he talks about violent protests against the site that has become a flashpoint in a debate over water resources.
Les semaines ou les jours qu'on a pu vivre au mois d'octobre ou
the weeks, days that we experienced in October or during that week of demonstrations were very tough. I heard in the news there was a lot of worry about the injured among the protesters. I very much regret that there were injuries, but no one or a few asked how we could go through that on our territory, to see our production tools ransacked, to have our equipment destroyed. I know that the Human Rights League was there to watch how law enforcement officers behaved, but the League of Human Rights was not too concerned about our experience, about how we suffered. It's very painful to see one's equipment. We do honest work, to see people come to destroy them and to justify that, supposedly for the reason that this is how it should be. That's not how it should be. It should be around a table to discuss as we are, not by destroying other people's tools. Am I going to destroy my neighbor's house because I disagree with him?
Clashes between activists and police at a demonstration at the Sainte-Soline site last month left scores injured as police repelled protesters trying to reach the construction site. Water scarcity in the European Union's biggest agricultural producer is a hot topic. Like other supporters of the reservoir project, Emmanuel argues it will allow surplus water from cooler water months to be used sustainably and ease pressure on resources during summer.
Cette réserve d'eau, c'est qu'elle nous permet de mettre en place des cultures de printemps.
This water reserve allows us to plant spring crops that alternate with winter crops, because these spring crops will need a minimum of water in the summer to be able to develop, to allow some profitability of the crop. If we don't have access to water, we can't secure the yield, since we're on land that dries up in the summer. And we absolutely need this irrigation, however moderate, to at least push our crops to the end of their vegetation cycle.
Pour au moins emmener nos cultures au bout de leur cycle de végétation.
Currently, we are subject to bans in the summer because the water reserves are too low, and we can no longer take water to preserve the environment and eventually for drinking water. And at this time, our crops cannot complete their cycle properly. With the reserve, we know the volume of water that we will have to have from start, and we can manage it as well as possible in the cycle of cultivation.
Dans la durée dans le cycle de la culture.
What we are nevertheless told is that the climate change will be more severe, will be more excessive, whether in terms of drought or rainfall. That is to say that there's a risk of having more extreme but less frequent and rarer rains in summer.
Mais moins fréquente et plus rare en été.
Critics who call such reservoirs mega basins denounce the water grab for the benefit of a few farms while climate change threatens access to water. The daily struggle of many in search of water and how this can cause crises was a focus in many sessions of the United Nations Conference in March. It is also one of the areas covered by the World Water Development Report 2023 by UNESCO.
Cooperation is really the heart of sustainable development in the water perspective. We also need that because the global trade is connected through water. So we are trading 1,500 square kilometers of water every year. My home country is Germany. If you would pour that effect, this virtual water on my home country, you would have a 4-meter high every year water all over the country.
Water use has been increasing globally by roughly 1% per year over the last 40 years and is expected to grow at a similar rate through to 2050, driven by a combination of population growth, socio-economic development and changing consumption patterns. The United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, in its World Water Development Report 2023, says actual increase in demand is happening in developing countries and emerging economies where it is driven by industrial growth and especially the rapid increase in the population of cities. It is in these urban areas that we are having a real big increase in demand. With agriculture using 70% of all water globally, irrigation for crops has to be more efficient as it is in some countries that now use drip irrigation, which saves water.
10% of the global population currently lives in areas that are high or critical water stress. In our report, we said that up to 3.5 billion people live under conditions of water stress at least 1 month a year.
As a result of climate change, the report says seasonal water scarcity will increase in regions where it is currently abundant, such as Central Africa, East Asia, and part of South America, and worsen in regions where water is already in short supply, such as the Middle East and the Sahara in Africa.
The global water cycle is a global common good. We just don't want to understand it because we believe water belongs to us, but nobody has a problem to say the ocean is a global public good or the air. But the water cycle is the same. It connects, it goes. We can stop it in a dam for a year or two. We can use it, but it will eventually come back to the global water cycle. So we need to invest with that in our minds. And here I come to the outcomes of the conference. I think this conference is really important to sharpen a couple of these foundational awarenesses that you need to transform our water action agenda that we will have from the conference. So there will be lots of commitments, but we need to make sure that these commitments transform the way we invest in water.
Since 2000, floods in the tropics have quadrupled, while floods in the north mid-latitudes have increased 2.5-fold. Trends in droughts are more difficult to establish, the report says, although an increase in intensity or frequency of droughts and heat extremes can be expected in most regions as a direct result of climate change. As for water pollution, the biggest source of pollution is untreated wastewater.
As developing countries emerge, the dietary and basically consumption patterns, if you will, because of course, whether it's more washing machines, dishwashers, things like this, they're all much more water intensive than what you'd have traditionally. So so our habits combined with population growth is what is driving demand. Also, just to meet the SDGs themselves on water supply and sanitation, if you've got right now 3.6 billion people do not have access to safe sanitation. Unfortunately, sanitation is right now the way we do it, it's extremely water intensive. It doesn't consume that much water, but it does use it. And if you don't have the treatment after use, then you're polluting the environment. I skipped this part because there's so much in the report, but if you go to water pollution, the biggest problem in developing countries, the biggest source of pollution is untreated wastewater. Globally, 80% of wastewater is released to the environment without any treatment. And in many developing countries, it's pretty much 99%. And treating wastewater is expensive. In developed countries, the number one cause of water pollution is agricultural runoff, because again, you're not if you're using pivot irrigation, there's a lot more runoff, and that runoff contains the fertilizers, the herbicides, pesticides, etc., that pollute water.
A day before the report was released on the margins of the United Nations 2023 Water Conference, Bankole Adeoye from Nigeria, Uzi, African Union Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, said the strategic importance of water places it in the front line of national interest.
The strategic importance of water as a primary and secondary source of economic development on a continent places it in the front line of national interest, given the need that water can be a veritable tool for both economic growth and stability. The reduction of water availability has led to manipulation of water to attain multi-dimensional interest, sometimes leading to conflicts at various levels, especially at the community level. It is in this recognition of water scarcity and competition as a security issue that resulted in the establishment of the African Ministerial Conference on Water in 2002.
The event, organized by Finland, the African Union Commission, Switzerland and Senegal, aimed to highlight how water cooperation can be used to enhance peace and security, as well as identify key opportunities, challenges and lessons learned from African countries.
Water diplomacy, as dynamic, politically oriented process, complements transboundary cooperation, providing means to prevent and resolve water-related tensions. Finland stands ready to cooperate and offer our support and expertise in water, peace and security theme, and in the capacity building services as well.
Water diplomacy and transboundary water cooperation are, of course, essential if we want to avoid that dwindling natural resources, exacerbated by a high degree of natural climatic variability and the impacts of climate change, fuel additional conflicts on the continent. This is reinforced by the fact that demand for water is on steep rise, especially for food, energy, and household uses. And there is a large remaining number of people without access to safe water and basic sanitation, both in rural and urban areas of the continent.
At the end, ministers from Africa, Latin America and the Middle East declared their countries' resolve to join a key United Nations accord known as the Water Convention. On the second day of the conference, Thursday the 23rd of March, new technology, water investment and cross-border cooperation were among the approaches proposed by international delegates present at the Water Action Agenda event. Speakers stressed the importance of united action in working to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and the targets connected to water.
Water is connected to everything. It is life, Ban Ki-moon used to say. It's there for our health, our biodiversity, our economy, our climate. But currently, water security is out of reach. We broke the hydrological cycle, as we say it, and it means that we have more and more water in our skies, battering across continents, our environment and communities, and less water available, fresh water in our grounds and in our rivers. And what is there is more polluted and more saline. So with a growing population and economy and demand, water scarcity now is undermining everything we value, from health, from security, from biodiversity, from our economies.
Among the ways proposed to tackle current and looming water scarcity were desalination techniques, like those proposed by Saudi Arabia, and a $3.8 billion investment in infrastructure, like the one laid out by Japan.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, human beings have now already crossed planetary boundaries in many areas. We are stepping towards catastrophes by accelerating climate change, aggravating the quality of water, and drastically reducing biodiversity. I understand that this is the meaning of early warning for all. The world should unite and act towards this aim. Japan will act to make this happen through water transformation. The government of Japan will contribute $500 billion Japanese yen, or approximately $3.88 billion US for this purpose. We have named it the Kumamoto Initiative for Water.
Water scarcity is a daily reality. 4.3 billion people struggle for at least 1 month per year. And around half the world's population experience extreme water scarcity for at least some part of the year. And then when you add to that sea level rise, or the acute vulnerability of small islands and coastal communities, ever more rapidly disappearing glaciers, rainforests, and wetlands that underpin global climate and weather systems. And you don't need to be an expert to understand that these figures and the associated costs, hundreds of millions every year, as well as lives lost. In the UK, we're getting our house in order, but with around half of Europe's water footprint falling overseas, and quite often on some of the most fragile, important habitats in the world and some of the poorest and most vulnerable people in the world, we obviously need to consider the impact of our supply chains well beyond our own borders.
Water is essential for all known life. Yet less than 3% of the world's water is fresh, and less than 1% is readily available. Climate change is altering the water cycle, resulting in flooding, droughts, and wildfires. It is also one of the key drivers of biodiversity loss. We stand ready to share our experience and expertise to help promote cooperation and collaboration over shared water resources, which is critical to ensuring sustainable management and environmentally sound protection of transboundary water resources. We also encourage integrated, system-wide, and inclusive initiatives that support water-related goals in developing countries, strategies that put women and indigenous peoples at the forefront.
Ensuring access to clean drinking water and sanitation is part of the 17-point to-do list the United Nations has set for sustainable development, alongside ending hunger and poverty, achieving gender equality, and taking action on climate change. Although the conference was not intended to produce the kind of binding accord that emerged from climate meetings in Paris in 2015, or a framework like the one set for nature protection in Montreal in 2022. Hundreds of action plans were sent to the United Nations before the conference started, but the World Resources Institute research group said that while some commitments offer inspiration, more of them miss the mark, variously lacking funding or performance targets, or neglecting to address climate change.
The conference demonstrated a central truth. As humanity's most precious global common good, water unites us all. And it flows across a number of global challenges. Water is about health, sanitation, hygiene, and disease prevention. Water is about peace, Water is about sustainable development, fighting poverty, supporting food systems, and creating jobs and prosperity. Water is about human rights and gender equality. That is why water needs to be at the center of the global political agenda. All of humanity's hopes for the future depend in some way on charting a new science-based course to bring the water action agenda to life. They depend on realizing the game-changing, inclusive, and action-oriented commitments made by member states and others at this conference. This means reinforcing water's place as a fundamental human right. It means reducing the pressures on our hydrological system and ensuring good decision-making and smart policies. It means developing new alternative food systems to reduce the unsustainable use of water in food production and agriculture. It means designing and implementing a new global water information system to guide plans and priorities by 2030. It means integrating our approach on water ecosystems and climate to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and strengthen communities. And this includes resilient infrastructure, water pipelines, and wastewater treatment plans, and ensuring every person in the world is protected with early warning systems against natural disasters by 2027. It means continuing to press for climate justice and global action to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius rise. And it means dramatic accelerating resources and investment into the ability of all countries to reach Sustainable Development Goal 6. A number of other follow-up steps are under consideration, including the recommended appointment of a special envoy on water to advance the prominence of water in the lead-up to the September SDG Summit, as well as the Summit of the Future next year. I look forward to reviewing our progress during July's high-level political meetings, and I can assure the full support of the United Nations system every step of the way.
When the conference ended on Friday, the 24th of March, there was hope it would spur political momentum and fears that too little is being done to help tackle chronic water stress globally. Nearly 700 alliances, including state and local governments, non-profit groups and some companies made voluntary commitments before and during this conference in New York. Projects range from investing in climate-smart agriculture and wetland restoration in the Niger River Basin to mapping the water system in The Hague, the Netherlands. These plans will now be reviewed ahead of another meeting in July.
We have close to 700 commitments now in the Water Action Agenda, all being uploaded. They're being reviewed and assessed for the high-level political forum in July. Is that enough? No. Water has to be addressed from the local level to the global level. We have fragmented water governance across the world, fragmented finance, and not enough science and data in place. And at the global level here at the UN, there's nothing on water. So the call for a water envoy, a task force moving forward, combining the capacity from within the UN, the member states, private sector and finance is of critical importance in moving these actions forward.
Around 30% of the plans submitted looked as though they would have an impact and indicated how they will be funded. Non-profit environmental reporting group CDP lamented the low turnout of 12 heads of state at the conference, as well as the lack of a planning to hold another.
This is only the beginning. This conference is the beginning of a rippling effect across the world. This is the start, but it will depend on the world if they pick up this call to action. Until this afternoon, the government of the Netherlands and Tajikistan have the mandate to co-host the conference, not the actions. The actions are voluntary commitments and they lack this overarching approach. Only if we get to a commitment of the world to drive and scale this forward will we succeed. And right now, that is still not the case.
The United Nations will now review these plans ahead of another meeting in July. That's our show for the week. Thank you for watching. Our inbox @channelstv.com is available for your comments and your questions. From all of us here in Lagos, it's bye for now.